What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York. We are here at Atlantic Studios today, and we are here with producer and musician Zach Kornhauser of The Place to Be to discuss his new EP, Life Cycles. Thank you so much for being here today,
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for letting me come on.
Yeah.
This is huge. I love it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's so great to have you here. I was just listening to the Life Cycles EP, and when it comes to prog metal, I mean, this is like on the level of a Porcupine Tree, of a Between the Buried and Me, Contortionist.
Thank you.
The craftsmanship is just absolutely awesome.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that a lot.
Being that this is an EP, do you feel that like what we heard from songs like Breaking the Fourth Wall or Trust, Mind Misery, Ready to Dream, is this all maybe a good representation of what like a full-length album is going to sound like in the future? Or being that this is an EP, this is still kind of like testing the waters a little bit?
I think it's probably a little bit of both because the first like two songs, Breaking the Fourth Wall and My Misery, those were like songs I wrote years ago and I just didn't like do anything with it. And then the last two songs, Trust and Ready to Dream, those are much more of like representative of at least more recent style writing, maybe in the past like 2-3 years. So it's kind of like a hybrid in that sense where stylistically it all could like be thrown into like that category of like an album. But at the same time, you know, it's covering so many years of work. So I think it's I don't really know. You know, I think it's just a bit of everything, a bit of hybrid. Yeah.
Well, prog metal is such an experimental genre. When you compare Yes to Porcupine Tree, you compare Between the Buried and Me to I'm trying to think of a prog band off the top of my head. Like you compare like all these different bands, there's so many different styles and experimental aspects behind it. So it's fair to say there's really no like, is there ever like a specific preconceived vision that you have going into the making of a song or an album, or is it a very like throw paint at the wall, see what sticks kind of process?
I don't know. I mean, maybe a bit of both. I think at least like when I like came to write these songs, all it started with was just me writing riffs and using like voice memos to just at least quickly notate them. And for a while I would literally just not even record. I would just like play these riffs nonstop, and eventually maybe I'd sit down and be like, okay, well, what can I do to like, put a form factor to it, like a song structure, right? And that's where I, would sit down even sometimes and just like study some of my favorite songs. And actually take note of like, okay, well, what is the song structure of this? What is like those elements, things like that, just so that it helps give me kind of an idea of like, if I'm trying to go for this style of production, what does it take for that? Not just from a song structure, but ear candy types of things. It's multi-layered, which sometimes can drive me a little crazy at times, but that's what makes it fun, I think.
Yeah. Well, a lot of prog albums and a lot of prog bands are also very conceptually driven as well.
Yeah.
It is really like the thinking man's style of rock or the thinking man's style of music. So with The Place to Be and Life Cycles, is this almost like a concept or a storyline that you're trying to create in a way?
Not like a concept in like, act 1, act 2 type of thing. That would be cool to do at one point. For me, though, there I guess you could maybe call it a concept in the sense that all the songs have something to discuss about, and this hence the name of Life Cycles, discussing different stages of my life and dealing with different mental states, not just bad ones but even good ones. Like the first track, Breaking the Fourth Wall, if I remember correctly, that was discussing about just general OCD, anxiety. My Misery is supposed to be my take, an instrumental take, if you will, also of like a panic attack and how I used to have panic attacks. Doing way better now, thankfully. But there's that. Trust is actually, this is like I think I mentioned before we started this about like my Porcupine-esque Tree song and maybe in the production, but it's also the one and only love song that I've ever written, which is for my wife, Rebecca, and that one was a really fun one to do and kind of get into a happier headspace in all that regard. And then the last one is kind of like that in a way, but also being like, okay, well, we have to work hard and like we all have to, understand that not every day is perfect and all that, but you just have to give it your all. It's kind of like power like type of song. Hence maybe why it's such a long song too.
Well, I mean, prog and long songs. I mean, it's almost essential and a requirement at this point, right?
Yeah, I did. I'm not gonna lie. I had to starting to write that song. I intended it first, I think, in my head to be like, I'm just gonna make it like a 5-minute song. But then it kept turning on, and then I was like, I think I was just probably also listening to a lot of long Dream Theater songs. A Nightmare to Remember is like a big influence song for me. So like I was listening to that and I was like, you know what, maybe I should just write a long song. And at that point I was like, I kind of just want to say I did it and see what comes from it. And by the end of it, I was really happy with how it came out to be. It was a really, really fun song from a production standpoint.
Well, when it comes to like the style that you're having with too, because I was listening to Underneath, the previous track that
that was from my solo name. That was a few years back.
Yeah, so I was going to ask if maybe that was sort of continuing in a similar vein as your solo work in a way, or being that this is. Like
I think it kind of is. I was talking with one of my good friends out in Seattle. His name's Aiden. He actually is doing some great things in the prog scene there. He's like creating a kind of a quick side note. He's creating a really cool outlet for progressive metal musicians to all jam together and try to make like monthly jams out of it to hopefully bring people together to jam. Quick side note, but I was talking with him and we were both, and I was kind of being like, I don't want to use my name for this, like my last name. It just didn't seem very, characteristic of maybe music, I guess, if that makes any sense. So I did come up with this name eventually, and it seemed to really resonate with me and kind of what I hope to in the future write more music for it to kind of resemble.
I love having this conversation with different prog artists. As somebody who's interviewed Dream Theater, Neil Blivoscaris, Caligula's Horse, Oceans of Slumber. I just love, because prog again is so diverse. When you compare, I guess Pink Floyd would be considered to be the first prog band, and then
one of them, for sure,
if they were even calling it that back then. But then you look at Yes, you look at all these different elements. To you, is there an essential element that prog has to have in order for it to be prog, aside from 17.5-minute long songs?
Right. I mean, maybe in like traditional sense, and when I say traditional, that could include both like old school prog, like you said, like Yes, and bands like from the 70s, and even like newer things from the 90s and on, like Dream Theater and going into like Porcupine Tree, Opeth. Traditionally, I would say anything with like odd time signatures are probably usually a given. Obscure themes, odd song structures. But honestly, I would say nowadays it can mean so many different things. I just think that it's a genre that doesn't have to have popular boundaries. And popular meaning just pop music in the sense of like, okay, verse, chorus, bridge, But there are prog songs that do that. I really just think honestly, I think anyone that will explain it will probably explain it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But I think that that in itself is what I think makes prog.
Yeah.
It could be so many different things, but it really comes down to just, I think, someone or a group of people writing music that there's no boundaries other than whatever boundaries that they impose on themselves.
Definitely. I've always said that prog is, because there's plenty of songs that I would call a prog song, but, it would be maybe even 3 to 5 minutes, but it doesn't follow that traditional structure in a way. Like Threshold is a great prog band.
I love them. Yeah, they're great.
Legends of the Shires is a fantastic.
Oh, that's such a good album.
Oh, we're gonna nerd out hard on prog. We're just getting started.
That's great.
But they have their choruses, but the way that they're able to deviate from it as well, it almost seems like it's a song that's able to kind of go outside the borders and come back within.
Well, it can, and I think one thing that I tried to do in the long song specifically, Ready to Dream. While listening to other like long prog songs, there seems to be this thing where it's like you can almost cut it into multiple songs. In most cases, you could think of it like that, where like you have your like main song in like structure, like anything like that, and then there's like a whole middle section which could be completely different. A really great band that does this is Haken.
I just saw them.
So did I.
At Puss and Rouge.
Yep, that was such a great show. Love those guys. They do such a great job of having like what you would maybe consider like a like a pop structure in this, but of course, prog metal. But then they'll just go into like a whole different type of vibe, which may be like not nearly as heavy, especially being that they're metal. It might just be like a really like low mellow section, and then the instrumental, and then somehow all of that, even though you can maybe call that a whole different song because it's just new sections, new motifs, and things like that, they'll end up somehow connecting it all back at the end of the song. And that's something that I tried to do in that last song, Ready to Dream. I had like this middle section, which was kind of a different vibe. Eventually, I tried to like bring it back together, and I had to like think of ways of how to like do that as creatively as I could. That's my own, identity, if you will, musical identity.
How do you know when you're finished with the song, though? Because that's the most typical.
Oh, jeez. I mean, honestly, I could go back and probably say, "Oh, damn, the mix needed, more 2K in the snare or something like that." You know what I mean? Like it's never. I always tell that's like the perfectionist OCD mentality that I have. It's just like I could always say that, but honestly, for me, I have to, go even sometimes like during like the songwriting process and be like, okay, I have to designate that this part of the song, for example, will only have 2 guitar parts, and then maybe 2 or 3 like layering keyboard parts, and that's it. I need to like set like a boundary on that, and very rarely will I maybe add or subtract something, but it does at the end of the day. It has to speak to it. There's a book that I read like during the pandemic. I'm blanking on the name of the book, but it's by Jesse Cannon.
Okay.
How are you familiar with him?
I've heard the name.
Yeah, he's a big YouTuber, also a big metal guy here in New York. He wrote a book, and it's just talking about like the music mentality, musician's mentality, and it's just saying like, don't do it for the sake of like what the status quo says. Like, who gives a shit if you do like you do that? Everyone's doing that. Just it has to speak. If it speaks to you, great. But like you need to do something that just speaks to you. And if you have any sense of it doesn't doing that, then back out, change something, rewrite something, do whatever you have to do.
Of course.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing that. Like me being working here at Atlantic versus writing my own music, totally different types of like ballparks, right? It's interesting seeing a lot of that stuff, and I hope maybe even one day I can incorporate both of those mentalities into my own music.
You took the next question I was going to ask you right out of my mouth.
There you go.
Because working here at Atlantic and producing, I was looking at your resume. Very impressive.
Thank you.
Very impressive work. I've loved a lot of the songs that you've mixed and whatnot.
Thank you.
Has though working with pop artists and artists of different genres maybe even helped bring some new ideas to how you incorporate? Because again, with Prog, it almost seems like that there's no rules. I think a really good Prog band that is an example of how they take like pop elements is Voyager.
Love Voyager. They just did the
Eurovision. Colors in the Sun came out in 2019. I still listen to it.
I was big into listening to them maybe like when I was in grad school in like 2018-19.
Oh, wow.
And I stopped listening to them for some reason, but I recently got back into them. I was like, damn, man, they are great.
Yeah. But like, has working with other artists maybe influenced you or maybe even helped you come up with new ideas for how you apply to your work? Basically, it's a very polite question I'm asking. Are you doing personal errands on company time?
If only, right? No, I think there's something to be learned from everything. If you had asked me like years ago when I was just like only wearing the metal hat and whatever, I would have been like, no, I can't like do this or whatever. But there's good stuff from everything. There's good music out there in any style, just as much as there's bad music in every style and every genre. You just have to like search for it. And I've worked with some people in and outside of both this studio and other places where you get influenced a little bit by other people because it's just one giant pool for people to experiment and try different things. I think if there's one thing I'd love to try doing that I just haven't ever, because I've been like done because I'm so used to just like using guitar, bass, drums, and maybe keys as like kind of my basis for writing music. I would love to get into some style of like maybe not like beats like hip hop beat style thing, although that could be cool. Just making drum loops or things like that into composition. We were talking about Porcupine Tree. They kind of have done that a lot. Their keyboardist Richard Barbary is a great example of just sound design. and all that. And I've seen people like come in here that just do that. They like, they may make a beat, but they are working with other sounds just to try to create an atmosphere, rather than maybe not so much as like okay, this is the main motif. Like in metal, we're so used to the riff, right? That's what is like the basis of majority of metal, or at least like the drums, right? So I'm thinking maybe things I've seen here and seen people do, maybe that could be like a type of crossover, and being like, okay, well maybe let me try to think of it, blend both worlds. Use the riff, right, to create the main motifs, but use kind of like these things I see of people like making soundscapes and atmospheres to try to incorporate that and maybe influence the rest of the production process.
Well, crossover genres is something that a lot of metal musicians love. Like, when you take like, in the music business, what you got, pop and R&B are like the two big, moneymaker genres.
Sure,
but like,
right.
you listen to a prog band, a good example would be Caligula's Horse.
Love them.
In Contact is probably my favorite prog album of the decade.
That last album, another side note, that
Rise Radiant.
That album got me through COVID. They came out right during lockdown. I even messaged them too, and
I interviewed them right in that lockdown.
Dude,
fantastic.
Love Jim Gray, those guys. Oh man,
yeah,
so good.
That's the one tour that got canceled because of COVID that still has to be made up.
I know, and now they just announced a tour for Europe, and I'm like, but what about us?
Yeah.
Come on, I'm gonna like buy that ticket up like it's like so quick. Oh my god.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that to be rescheduled. You hear that, Jim?
Yeah,
but
we'll see y'all. Yeah,
but I feel like with Jim Gray's vocals, I mean, you could put that in an R&B song, like in a way, and I could easily see an R&B artist like Christina Aguilera or Whitney Houston, God rest her soul, sing over like maybe like a prog metal song, like something by like Opeth or something like that.
Another great example. I've already named the band, but the vocalist Ross Jennings from Haken.
Yeah,
the new album of theirs, Fauna.
Yeah.
Is the best representation of what a prog vocalist can do in many styles of music. It's remarkable.
Definitely.
So good. So good.
Definitely.
Yeah.
When it comes to you're being a fan of prog because you're wearing a Contortionist shirt, a Clairvoyant, still a fantastic record. But like there's the heavy aspects when you listen to like Opeth's Blackwater Park or something like that, and then you listen to like a heavier prog band like a Legion or something like that, or Between the Buried and Me.
Yeah.
But then you mentioned Haken, that's a little bit more softer, Caligula's Horse in a way. So it almost seems. Do you feel like that there's almost like a threshold to how heavy or how light a prog band can be? Because in the end, it's all called metal. In the end,
sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, that's why it's great that we can have bands like Opeth, Between the Buried and Me, which would be maybe we're talking about big prog bands. Those are like very heavy, right? And then you have like Haken, who they're pretty big too. But I would almost say they're like very Dream Theater meets like Queen.
Yeah.
At least in the vocal harmonies and all that. You're right. There is such like, I think it's like it's maybe an unwritten threshold. Another great example, and this band, bless their heart and souls and love their music, they, I think, took it to a whole new level. It also is different that they don't have a vocalist, is Animals as leaders.
Of course. I knew that was coming when you said that.
Exactly. Like those guys, they haven't reinvented the wheel in ways that I don't think like were ever imaginable before. I mean, not just the use of 8 strings. I mean, that's a huge thing. But Meshuggah was already doing that before.
Yeah, of course.
A little different. They're more like technical groove related, but so are Animals as leaders. But it's like you just take this musicianship, and with a band like them, they can go from heavy, I mean like really heavy, to like playing songs that are like super flamenco guitar influence, which is so cool. And that's what I love about any prog band, is that they can have this very diverse thing.
Yeah. And I think also it's really bridged with like melodic death metal as well. Like one of my personal favorite prog bands altogether, Scar Symmetry.
They just put out a new album. Yeah,
just a brand new album.
Yeah, I need to listen to
it. I set aside a time.
Yeah,
it'll change your soul.
Well, I love Per Nilsson. He is.
Oh, that dude is an evil genius.
He's so underrated. I'm glad that he was able to help fill in the role for Frederick and Meshuggah during those few years on tour. So good.
Fantastic band. But like, a lot of that heavy, like, like the melodic death metal bands too, with like Insomnium or Swallow the Sun, who also they bring like the doom or prog aspect behind it. It almost seems like prog is always tied to something else, whether it's progressive black metal, as we've seen with like bands like Emperor, or we've seen with progressive death metal with bands like Cynic. It almost seems like it's always able to bridge between other things as well.
Yeah, and exactly, and even like saying all that, it's so hard to find a definition or a threshold that keeps it together and that calls it prog, because if we're just talking again definition prog, where it's like, oh, a lot of time signatures, long things, obscure themes or whatever. Like some of these bands that we've mentioned can maybe be more prog than maybe other like bands where maybe they lean mostly, say, death metal, but then they have a hint of it. I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole. That's like the crazy thing with this. You can go down a rabbit hole and really get lost with how you define genre-wise a band. But again, going back to it, prog is one of those genres, if you will, that has no rules.
Absolutely.
So in some ways, you can call it even not more of a. I mean, I've heard people call it a movement. I've heard people call it, all these other definitions that take it out of this category of just a genre.
Well, what's funny is I do consider it a movement, and this is by no means to like say that fashion or the image is part of the music, but look at the nu metal movement. We can picture what a nu metal fan will look like. We look at the emo movement. We look at what an emo fan could look like.
Yeah.
You look at prog now. I always see you go to the Kiesel guitar booth at NAMM. They're all lined up there.
As an owner of a Kiesel guitar, I get it.
I mean, I could listen to your music and tell that you were playing that.
Yeah,
and I mean that as a compliment.
I actually, funny story with that. I actually just did come out with a playthrough video of the single that I did in the other room.
Oh wow,
that was a fun one. But yeah, I used the Kiesel guitar there. But I totally get what you're saying about that.
About the
dress.
And I don't mean this in a derogatory. If you were to say like, you could almost say like the rock crew, are the jocks. The doom crew are the goths. Prog are the nerds. But I mean it is a compliment.
I mean, what I'm wearing right now, I feel like you would see so many prog heads do. But then again, you'll see so many different other people say dressing differently.
Yeah.
Or whatever at a prog show. I probably, when I went to go see Hagen, I thought, just from the people I saw, looking at myself, I was like, damn, I look like a freaking nerd. Not that I had any issue with it, but then I see other people like maybe dressed more like yourself, which may associate with another style of music metal or whatever,
Yeah. Well, I wear this blazer at every show, so it's my way of blending into every show, whether it's a death metal show, a rock show.
If that's your goal, then that's a pretty good idea.
It's my way of going undercover. I'm repping Heaven Shall Burn today.
Okay, well, great,
fantastic album.
Oh,
and the final question I wanted to ask you is this being a mixer and all this, because I've always said that a mixer is basically the fifth Beatle, the sixth Beatle, if you're in Slipknot, the 10th Beatle, or something like that. It's an instrument in itself that requires a lot of talent, a lot of focus and dedication. When it comes to mixing, is there also, and this mainly applies with other artists, is there a creative essence in a way like that where you are kind of like bringing your own spin on their work like you do with your music in a way? Or do you kind of maybe like have to adjust your craft and there's almost kind of like a blanket rule book that applies to...
I mean, if you're just going by definition of a mixer, I mean, really, we're not. On paper, maybe not. We're not supposed to be drastically changing anything. We're supposed to be making things fit cohesively with all of the elements. But that doesn't mean it's not creative, because it definitely is creative, and that's what each mixer, brings to the table. They have their own sonic landscape in their head that they think maybe this should sound like this. Maybe the track should sound a little bit, airy and fizzy, or this track should sound like warm, or like things like that, or using different tools to make to emphasize or de-emphasize types of elements in a track, right? So I think it's a combination of that, and primarily doing a lot of mastering lately. It's all about creating the synergy in this just general communication between the master and the mixer, whoever, and the artist, and making sure that we can understand exactly what's been in their head for weeks, months, years, whatever, how long they've been working on a project, right? I find that in itself to be somewhat of an art and a craft in its own.
Yeah.
Is to be able to understand what they define as their art.
Yeah.
in all. Yeah.
I've had the privilege of speaking with a lot of people who do mixing and mastering, whether it be Chris Lord-Alge or Mark Urselli, and it's always. I've always found it fascinating in a way because it's a technical skill. It is just as much of being like a technician, and it's just as much as a science as it is an art.
Yeah.
And so part of me wonders: is there like a rule that like applies to mixing that applies to everybody, or are you almost like having to put yourself in the artist's shoes and kind of like seeing things from their vision in a way?
I think it can be both. I found myself a lot of times, thinking like with mostly the scientific, technical hat of things. I think metal may naturally lend itself more to that because the production style just historically has kind of just shown itself to that. But then again, I've also worked on projects where like I had to like completely take that hat off and put myself even more into the artist's hat and realize, well, maybe what I might do in one project is the absolute opposite of what's called for. Mm-hmm. And it might be hard for me to be like to let go and be like, oh damn, I should have EQ'd and compressed the kick, completely differently than what ended up coming out because I, so used to doing X, Y, and Z where maybe, on paper you're so used to doing these technical things. It just depends really. It's such a and I think that's why I love mastering a lot as of lately is because it keeps me on my toes and has to allow me to really take every project with an objective perspective and not have any preconceptions going into it and just take it, whatever that track, record, album, EP, whatever it is, take it for face value and be like, what is there? What is being present? Don't assume that needs something else. If it doesn't need it, it doesn't need it. Or if it does, or if it needs something, it needs something. Let me just take it one step at a time. And I think now that I'm working on other projects and all that, it's almost kind of a full circle because mastering is the last stage of the production, and I'm able to, even when I'm working with friends on their music or whatever, try to help them kind of like think about these steps, not let it influence their like decisions because art is art, but just maybe think about this long food chain, or so to speak, to see what the end product can actually be like, Well, it goes both ways.
Well, from listening to your work as well as the artists that you have worked with, whatever you're doing it right.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate it. It's fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today and for the privilege of being here in this epic studio.
Thank you.
Is there just anything else with the place to be that you would like to promote? Could we be expecting more new music soon? Also working, where could people, any other aspiring prog musicians, if they're looking for people to mix and master, where they can find you and all that?
So
plug away.
Okay, cool. So for anything audio, like mix mastering or whatever, you can go to, and really the music too, you can go to my website, kornhausersound.com, or my Instagram is kornhausersound. And as far as new music, I've been kind of just letting this sit for a minute. That doesn't mean I'm not like having riffs and like things like I'm coming up at home with. I just need to sit down and just do the work. It's such a tedious process except for a few people that I brought in on the project that were either doing some keyboards or all the vocals. I was doing it all. I programmed the drums, I played bass, I played guitars, I edited everything, mixed, mastered. Fucking pain in the ass. Yeah. And there's pros and cons that come with that. But obviously that does take a little bit longer to do. But I really want to get back into it because I do have a lot of things that are cooking in my head. That will be more reflective of my musical identity at this very moment. So I'm excited to do that. I just need to sit down and really just get to it.
Well, the Life Cycles EP definitely left me wanting more, so I can't
wait to hear it. I love hearing that. It's so great. I love that.
It'll be worth the wait for however long it takes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to get to it. Yeah.
But thank you so much.
Thank
everybody.
You,
Zach Kornhauser, be sure to check out Life Cycles by The Place to Be.
Yeah.
This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.
Yes.